I hope the Zoom automatic translation works well for you. It did not work on my end for the introduction, so I hope nice things were said about me. It's lovely to be here. And today my focus is really the question, is coaching the magic wand for business challenges? And what I wanted to do is, first of all, share a little bit of my story as to how I came to coaching, and then show how those skills can really be beneficial in a work environment. I'll give you a few examples, and I'll draw on the core competencies defined by the EMCC and a little bit by the ICF as well. The ICF stands for International Coaching Federation, to show you the kind of depth of learning that goes with the coaching profession. So let's see. Here we go. So today's objective is literally to discover how coaching competencies can be applied to your day-to-day as a leader. And that's really how I stumbled into coaching myself. So my background is more, I'd say, technical, or well, it's economics and finance. It's pretty hardcore in terms of skill. And what I discovered 4 years into my career, so I was still fairly junior in the organization, was that those skills, those technical skills, were somehow not taking me as far as I wanted to go. And I then discovered, in a way, that you have the technical skills on the one hand, and you need to marry them with coaching skills on the other hand. And this together gives you a really robust skill set for your leadership and your day-to-day in the business. So today we'll have 3 specific kind of groups of examples where coaching skills can help. Coaching skills can help you lead projects and meetings more productively, with people feeling safe to contribute ideas, to challenge you, and to then let you see your blind spots. Coaching skills can help you embrace a culture of constructive relationships and cross-cultural competence. This is really important for teamwork. And then finally, coaching skills can help you maintain curiosity and continuously adapt to remain relevant in the market, which is really necessary in today's world, given how fast everything is changing. So those are 3 areas. There are many, many more areas of applications. You can use coaching skills for sales. You can use coaching skills for business development. There's much more out there, but given the limited time we have today, I thought I would stick to those 3. So let's get started with the first one. If you look at meetings, meetings are very often ineffective. And if you look at projects, they're very often poorly managed. So what happens? Usually a handful of people dominate the conversation. So a lot of others who might have really good ideas cannot contribute. Very often you also What happened? Do I need to repeat? Somehow I was mute. Okay, I'll continue. So very often there's a lack of focus and agenda. And at the end of the meeting, rather than having an action, there's the desire to reconvene in another meeting. That's the most frequent action. So meetings, people leave meetings with no idea as to what's happening next. No decision has been made, and nobody knows what's expected of them. So how can coaching skills help? Coaching skills can help you lead more productive meetings, and they can also help you do more effective project management. So let's have a look. The next slide is very detailed. What I wanted to do is have a slide you can take a picture of and apply immediately in your day-to-day. What we see at the very top is the competency here as defined by the EMCC. There are 2 big coaching competences here that can help you with meetings and with project management. One is managing the contract, and the second is to have an outcome and an action orientation. So what does managing the contract mean? Those are coaching skills. So this is what happens when a coach has a coaching session. But what I'm talking about today is how you can actually apply the very same skill that a coach would use in a coaching session to your business meeting, to your project management. So in a business meeting and in a coaching session, you would ask, what is our goal today? Why are we meeting? What are the people's responsibilities? Maybe one person is taking notes and preparing the minutes of the meetings. Maybe someone has been invited because of their legal competence. Maybe someone else has been invited because of their financial competence. Then having clarity on what would an ideal outcome look like. What do you hope to have reached at the end of the time together? And then once you have clarity on what the goal is for the meeting, what needs to be discussed to achieve this goal. And so then you would have, this would define your points on the agenda, right? And you would then look at, okay, how much time do we have? And sometimes introduce time boxing. If you have 3 points, one of them very important, 2 smaller ones, you would say, okay, let's focus 2/3 of our meeting time on the really important one and the remaining third on the 2 smaller ones. So that's the managing the contract. It's having clarity on the expectations, what it is that we want to achieve, on the boundaries, so what's within the scope of the meeting, what's outside of the scope of the meeting, and on the stakeholders. So who's around the table, who do we need to involve, who do we need to think of? The second competence in coaching is the outcome and action orientation. And so here it's always that you don't just talk with a coach for the sake of talking. You talk in order to achieve a certain goal. So there's always the focus on, okay, what's the goal? What is it we want to reach at the end of our time together? And a coach is there to support you, to challenge you, to stretch you, and to make sure you're able to follow through on the action identified. Again, those are the very same skills that we need in a business context, right? So in the business context, we want to see, okay, what is the progress towards our stated goal? This could be in a meeting. We wanted to discuss X. How are we doing? We still have 60 minutes left. Are we on track? But it could be in a project as well, right? It could be like, here's our KPI for this project. We still have 6 months to go on this project. How are we doing towards this KPI? And then you would look at, okay, what are the insights? What are the learnings about the project, about the meeting or the subject matter being discussed? What are the insights and the learnings about ourselves as a team discussing this, as a team working on the project? And then the very kind of standard coaching closing of a session. What are the next steps? What are potential obstacles? Anticipating as much as you can. Looking at what are the resources required. Maybe you need budget, maybe you need extra people, maybe you need access to certain decision makers. And then how do we ensure accountability? How do we make sure that people who say they're going to take some actions forward actually do them? And how do we close? So that's kind of 2 skills, coaching skills that are one-to-one applicable to the business world. I gave the examples of meetings and of project management. The second piece is around conflict. So here, unfortunately, there's a really sad statistic that more than 1 in 3 workers experience conflict at work. And so obviously, this has negative consequences for the business. There's increased absenteeism. So people who experience conflict at work usually experience stress, anxiety, depression. So they will take time off work. Some of them will go on long-term sick leave. You have high turnover. Very often conflicts are not properly addressed in the workplace. And so what happens is either someone is being let go of by the company, or someone is just so tired of the conflict that they decide to go themselves. So you have resignations, you have dismissals, and that results in increased recruitment cost for the company. And then lastly, you have underperformance. You have less collaboration, you have less teamwork, so missed opportunities for innovation, for creativity, and for problem solving. So let's look at coaching skills in that area. So with conflict, I found quite a few things that coaching could actually help and support. So coaching skills can help you build constructive relationships. really building a bridge between you and another colleague, making sure you have a mutual basis, a mutual understanding as to how you think and how you approach projects and things differently. It's also very helpful for diverse and inclusive teams. And here in this picture, the diversity is more around, you have a bit of diversity in terms of gender, you have a diversity in terms of race, but there's much more than that, right? There's diversity in the way people think, there's diversity in character. And so if you are able to build bridges between people to have mutual understanding, thanks to coaching skills, then you can have really productive teamwork. And the last one is cross-cultural competence. So right now we have technical software that helps us in our cross-cultural understanding, right? English is not my mother tongue, so I'm making an effort, I'm speaking in English. The Zoom autopilot is translating this into Chinese so that hopefully you can understand what I'm saying, and vice versa. When you ask me questions at the end of the session, I can understand the questions you're asking me. But cross-cultural competence goes much more beyond that, right? It's also about understanding the nuances, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is okay, what is not okay in a given culture. And something that is very polite in one culture can be deeply offending in another. And their coaching skills is really helpful too, because rather than judging, we will look at this from a stance of curiosity. We'll be trying to understand rather than have black and white, good, bad judgment coming in. So let's look again at the two big competencies that are helping here. There are more. There are several competencies that go into managing conflicts, but obviously for the sake of time, I wanted to zoom in on just two. One is understanding self, and the other one is building the relationship. And here again, so whereas on the first one, you remember on the meetings and the project management, I had questions that you can copy paste and take into your workplace and apply immediately. This one is more about inner work, reflection, and taking time to question yourself, to observe yourself, and to understand what is happening for you. So understanding self is obviously having first awareness of what is happening for you. What are your values? What are your beliefs? And how do those values and beliefs shape your behavior? Recognizing this and then using this obviously to enhance your effectiveness at work. So being aware of the influence of context and of culture on yourself and on others. And then using this awareness of yourself to benefit your context. So here the language speaks of the client, but you can translate the client to, your work colleagues, for example, or your organization. Then there's also managing the emotion to stay present. Sometimes we have someone opposite us who's in distress, who may be quite agitated because something is really important to them, or who may be a bit sad, or who may be timid. So how can we use our emotions to really help that person? And then the one I highlighted a few more, there are quite a few. If you look up EMCC core competencies and ICF core competencies, you'll see there are like at least 30 or so of markers like this. One other that I find helpful is mentally and emotionally preparing for meetings. All too often, executives rush from one meeting to the next, and they don't have time to anticipate who is going to be there, what kind of frame of mind might they be in on that day, and how can they then present the information so that it lands well with that person. And the last one, seeking help from outside sources when necessary, absolutely. So this in the business context could be a mentor or a trusted colleague who can help you. The last piece, the second big skill block here, is building the relationship. And so this one is a lot about establishing trust and safety in the team or with an individual, being very present and listening very actively. And so the active listening is a skill that coaches finesse, that is about listening beyond the words. So not just what is being said, but really, what's the tone of voice? What's the body language? What's the full meaning of what this person is saying just now? And then also showing support and empathy and concern for the person opposite you, adapting your approach. So let's imagine you have someone who's very indirect and you come from a culture that is very direct, then adapting your approach to being much more indirect. Vice versa, if you come from an indirect culture and suddenly you're doing a mergers acquisition with a German company, which are very direct, then you can adapt your approach to be very direct with them, but not so much with someone else. And then reflecting and summarizing what is being communicated. This is so important. So very often in a meeting, someone will leave with one understanding, someone else with another understanding, a third person with yet another understanding. So reflecting and summarizing, saying, okay, what I heard us say is da 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 da. And I think we agreed to doing this, this, and this. Is this correct? Am I understanding this correctly? And then letting people confirm or deny or build on what you just said will prevent a lot of misunderstandings. A lot of time is being lost in the business because people do not take the time to reflect and summarize. And the last piece is noticing emotions and energy shifts and nonverbal cues. Very often we would have meetings where everyone nods and everyone says, yes, yes, we're going to do this, but nothing happens. Why? Nothing happens because people are not on board. They don't agree. But maybe they don't want to say this openly. So rather than say openly in the meeting, I disagree, which would be very impolite and challenging of the seniority, they just don't do it. And so as a leader, if you learn to notice the emotion, to notice the energy shifts, back to the second bullet point here, to notice the tone of voice, the body language, then you're usually able to catch that and to see that not everyone is not on board. And then to pause and to just say, I sense that there might still be some points we haven't discussed. What is it that still needs to be discussed? And there are ways to do this that are less confrontational. So if it's a culture where people are afraid to speak up, you can use technology like a whiteboard or like electronical post-its where it's anonymous. No one knows who contributed which idea. So there are ways to build the relationship, ways to establish trust and safety to allow everyone to voice their concern and to thus build a stronger team, to build a space for more diversity and for more inclusion in the workplace. And I can give more concrete examples of that towards the end of the presentation or in the Q&A. And my last point now is around company longevity. So we looked at projects and meetings. We looked at the importance of productive conflict for better teamwork, for diversity and inclusion, for better engagement more generally. Now, the last point I wanted to look at is the company longevity and the fact that if you look at the S&P 500, it has declined by more than 50% in the last century. So at the beginning of the last century, companies lived, roughly on average around 60 years, sometimes 65. And now there are predictions that by 2030, the average life expectancy of a company will be more around 15 years, 15. This is really, really low. Why? What's the problem here? And so what you see is a few things, right? There's a lack of customer centricity. So companies don't necessarily are closely in tune with what it is that the customer wants. So they're underperforming their competitors. Then there's poor risk management. So failure to anticipate future trends or future disruptions. And thereby, so then less strategic thinking, The decision making is not possible because they don't have enough information and they lack the agility. So very often companies who do scenario planning, who do strategic foresight are in a better position because they have a plan B. Sometimes they even have a plan C and a plan D. And then the lack of innovation. So companies that don't continuously improve and innovate, companies that just stay and continue to operate the way they've always operated, they will not survive simply because the pace of the world is a lot faster these days. So you have that kind of third problem bucket, if you want. And here again, coaching skills can help. How? So coaching skills can help companies be more agile and embrace continuous improvement. Coaching skills can help for customer-centric innovation, and coaching skills can help for performance management of your staff. How? Again, two big skills. They're more than that. I just tried always to emphasize the two most important ones. The one that I absolutely love is enabling insight and learning. So coaching, why would you work with a coach? It's not to have the same conversation you always had, to kind of redo the thinking that's in your head anyway. It's really to shift. A coach is there to help you see things differently, to help you see things in a way that you never looked at before. And that's important for individuals, but it's equally important for teams and companies. So when we were talking about company longevity, if a company has coaching style conversations around their strategy, asking questions such as, what are we missing? What is it we're not anticipating? What if our number one product was irrelevant 5 years from now? What would we do? Kind of doing the scenario thinking, pondering on various options for the company. That helps you then to see your strengths, to have an awareness as to where you could pivot your strategy, as to what you could do if there's a massive disruption. And it's the same for individuals. So when we work, or when a coach works with an individual, with a team or an organization on enabling insight and learning, what are the skills? What is it that they do? There's a skill of seeing patterns, really seeing patterns both in the thinking and in the actions. And sometimes there's a mismatch. Sometimes there's a certain pattern in thinking that is not matched in the action. And so a coach would highlight this, would say, you're not walking the talk. You're saying this when you talk, but you're saying this when you act. It's not congruent. What is missing for you to be walking the talk? It also enables persons to make connections between feelings, behavior, and performance. And very often it is linked. And it also recognizes the complexity of the environment, right? Because we don't operate on our own. We're embedded in systems. So there are lots of uncertainties and possibilities and constraints. And sometimes there would be questions in coaching like, in an ideal world, what would you do? And then obviously you need to bring this back to the current reality, which is not the ideal world, and be very specific as to, okay, what is it we can do now? And so that obviously links back to the first one, right? The end of the meeting. So what is your action? What are the obstacles? What's the support? What will you do concretely? And do you need any accountability to follow through on that? And the last piece that I listed here, there are more out there, is around feedback and challenge to increase this awareness. And so that's really important for performance management, for example. You'd be saying, hey, you're really good at this. Your presenting skills are awesome. I would like to pitch our new strategy to, the next client tomorrow. Can you do that, please? And the evaluation as well, looking at, okay, what went well? What did not go so well? And what's the one improvement that we could do? And so evaluation can be both formal and informal. Usually you would have a formal process somehow and have some rigorous system, which we have when we have performance management our staff. But it's the same with clients, right? Some companies have client feedback and client ratings. And if you don't get 5 stars out of 5 stars, or if you get just 2, you would start looking at this and be like, okay, what are we missing? Why are ratings going down? What's happening here? How do we need to pivot and shift our product and services so that we actually respond to the market demand, to what the customer wants? And obviously the ability to receiving and accepting feedback in a constructive way. So not feeling attacked, but seeing it as an opportunity for learning. The biggest mindset in coaching is literally the one of curiosity and seeing things from a learning perspective, asking oneself, okay, what can I learn from this? What is it I'm missing? How can I be even better at this? And so if we go back to, the performance management, I've explained how the coaching skill of evoking awareness and of evaluation really helps in performance management. If you look at the customer-centric innovation, it's the same thing. It's looking really deeply at understanding the customer, having a lot of empathy for their situation, trying to be in their shoes and to see, what are we missing? What's working well? What's not working well? What's the one improvement we could do going forward? And it's the same for the agility and the continuous improvement. This one looks, so we were looking at the staff in terms of performance management. We were looking at the company's services and products in terms of the customer centric approach. And now we're looking at the broader business. So the competitors, the sector you're in, the countries you work in, what is shifting, how are they moving, where are you doing well, where are you well positioned for the future, where do you need to tweak and pivot possibly and continuously improve to stay relevant going forward. So those were those. So that was kind of my whiz tour of how coaching skills can help for business. So we looked at how they can help you lead more productive meetings, how they can help you lead effective project management and constructive relationships, have diverse and inclusive teams, cross-cultural competence, customer-centric innovation, agility, continuous improvement, and performance management. There's much more than that. And I just picked a few out of a long list of various skills that coaches have to master. On the right-hand side of the slide, I put some numbers that I could find through, a quick search on the internet. Most of them refer to the US. I did not find that much data on China itself, but it gives you a sense of all the money that's wasted by not having coaching skills in the business. And I find the numbers quite staggering. Just if you look at the unnecessary meetings, a company of roughly 5,000 employees could have savings of up to 10 million per year. If you look at the productivity, conflicts in the workplace make you lose up to 2.5 weeks of productivity. It's just the productivity. So it's not even counting the legal costs, etc., of the disputes going in front of court. The lack of inclusiveness, up to 1 trillion per year for companies, and poor performing employees costing up to 450 billion every single year for the economy. This is mind staggering. And so this is, I think, leading us to the last slide. Whether it's my training or whether it's another training, I really don't care. But my strong recommendation would be learn coaching skills. They will help you really navigate business challenges successfully, a little bit like this crane bird that's flying out of the pack and that's kind of really soaring in the sky. It will elevate your impact in your day-to-day as a leader. The only one thing I would say in recommending coach training programs is take one that is accredited, either with the EMCC or with the ICF. Those are the two global bodies out there. This way you can guarantee that the training you get is really valuable and really impactful and professional. So that's it from me. I'd love to give you more examples on the various, fields of applications. I don't like talking at people like I've done now for the past half hour. I really like more of a dialogue. So I hope we can get into a dialogue now. Feel free to share issues you have or cases you face in your day-to-day as a leader, and I can then hopefully share ideas and establish the bridge to coaching skills and show you how coaching skills can help in that context. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lise. Thank you for your fantastic presentation about the coaching skills for navigating business challenges and also the coaching competencies. Thank you. And now we've seen a lot of comments from the audience and also some questions from them, and we have collected them. And now let's move on to the Q&A. 非常感谢丽丝女士刚才精彩的演讲。我们现在进入问答环节，大家如果有任何问题的话，可以把你的问题打在聊天框里，我们会在线回答大家的问题。Okay, the first question is the instant. What is productive conflict? Productive conflict, and you mentioned it, yeah?
So productive conflict for me is a situation where people do not hide away from sharing their differences, but do so in a very respectful manner, really listening to the other person and trying to understand where that person is coming from. It does not mean that you need to agree with the person, so you can agree to disagree, but there's a real curiosity and willingness and openness to listen. And very often out of this, when you engage in such a way without prejudging or without labeling the person, saying that person is stupid, you know what sometimes happens, that person is a disruptor, that person is a blocker, that person is someone I don't want to interact with. If you come at it from a really curious stance, which is the coaching stance, always be curious, then you will discover some shared foundation. Because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. We have a big shared foundation. And if you manage to then connect with one another from that foundation, the conversation and the conflict completely changes. Is that answering the question?
Yeah. And also I wondered about the productive conflicts, and during the process, maybe the emotions, the negative energy that can also turn to be positive. But how about those people who can't control their emotions, and what can the leaders will do to change that emotions? Because sometimes when the team member shares his or her opinion, at the beginning, the emotions can be positive and the conflict is productive, but this person may fall into a trap that fall into negative emotions, and then the conflict can turn negative. And the leader may need to be aware of this and control the emotions, the energy in the room, right?
So there are various elements here that I hear in this question. There is how, let's imagine you are in that conflict with this person. There's how you can react. And then there's also a scenario where I don't have a third finger, let's see it like this, where you have your leader as well. So you have the two persons having the conflict, and you have a leader or someone from HR or an external mediator or coach who is helping the conversation. So let's do those two examples. The first example, I actually have a personal one. When I was in the workplace working for a bank, and someone who was a little bit senior than me, but we were in the same team, was literally yelling at me. And so I was like, okay, what do I do? In my head, I was thinking, do I yell back? I can yell back if I need to. But I decided not to, so I stayed very calm. I was already trained as a coach, so I had those competencies of the ability to observe what is happening and to pause for a small moment to decide, what am I going to do? Very often we don't pause. Something happens, we react. It's very quick, puff, puff. And so in coaching, you learn to pause in the middle and then to decide whether you're going to react or not. And if you decide to react, how you're going to react. So I paused, and then I used the coaching skill of observation. So I shared an observation and I said, hey, name of the person, I'm not going to say who it was. Hey, so-and-so, did you just realize that you were yelling at me? So it was not accusatory. It was not, oh, you're so stupid, you're yelling at me. But I was just like, did you realize? Did you notice? From a very loving place. And the person was devastated. They had not realized. They were under a lot of stress for other reasons. And whatever the situation was between us had kind of triggered that stress. They apologized profusely. And we then became a really, really good working team. If I had reacted differently by yelling back, it would have been a different story, right? So this is one example of if you yourself have those skills, you can use them to react completely differently than what people might expect. So, a different one reaction could have been to yell back. Another one, very common one, could have been to not say anything, but then feel like a victim and feel really bad. And the third in the middle, which is more of a coaching reaction, is to put it on the table very lovingly with curiosity and saying, hey, what's happening here for you? You're yelling at me. I'm really curious. I want to find out what's happening. And so this leads to different conversations. And the same thing, so in the three-way example that I was giving earlier, the same thing can happen if you don't have the skill. You would have the leader or the HR person or an outside mediator who would bring in those skills between the two persons who are having the conflict. Is that helpful?
Yeah, very helpful. Yeah, thank you very much. And also from what you shared, yeah, it's a powerful tool for leaders to have coaching. Yeah, thank you. And let's move to the second question. I'll put it in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share an example where coaching has led to an improvement in team performance?
Yeah. So there, my brain goes automatically to the slide I had around diverse and inclusive teams. Because very often in the business, the biggest stress and tension comes when people who are not the same work together. Now, if you are the same, so by this I mean like maybe you studied in the same university, you have similar values, you have a similar way of approaching problems, you can have a different gender and a different culture, I don't care, but it's more like the how you work is very similar, then there's a lot of harmony. It's easy because you don't need to explain because the other person does it in exactly the same way. However, here the negativity could be that you always do it in the same way. So you're less innovative. There's certain things you don't see. Like there are various things that you will miss as a result of being pretty much like this. If enhanced team performance comes from diversity, it comes from having someone at the table who will disagree, who will tell you, I don't think this is the right approach. Or who will say, have you considered this and this? Have you thought of that and that? And sometimes it's really annoying. You're like, come on, I just want to do my thing quickly. And I don't want to spend time thinking of other things I should consider, other target groups I should think about, or different ways of doing what I'm doing. However, if people learn to value one another for the different skills that they bring, then you have increased team performance. So there are a lot of tests out there that corporate organizations like because they're simple and very simplified test where someone is either green, yellow, red, or blue, depending on their personality and their working style. And I remember doing this for my team, and we had all the colors of this test in my small team, which was great. And at the same time, it led to tension because the red person was really driving the blue person mad, and the yellow person was driving the green person mad. But this test helped us to understand. So here, what is the coaching? Coaching is around this awareness, is around saying, hey, this is how I like to work. So, to give you an example, some people will like to finish something way before the deadline, and others complete it just a few minutes before, because this is just the way they work. And so if you know this, as a manager, let's assume you're the manager and you're completing things way before the deadline. If you have a team member who does everything last minute, at good quality, at last minute, you will be really stressed. You'll be like, oh, it's not done, it's not done, it's not done. What do I do? But if you know that this is how they work, and if you've had a conversation around this diversity that you have in your working style, then it's okay. You can start to relax because you know you can trust that person to finish it, and to finish it to a really good standard. And you'll know, it'll be, probably on the day, not 2 weeks before, but it's okay because you've learned to navigate. And so in the coaching conversation, there's one, the awareness, what is different about us? And second, there's this constructive conversation around, what do I struggle with in your difference? Like, I really struggle with that. And then can we find some middle ground? Can you adapt a little bit? Can I adapt a little bit? And it's this discovery conversation where there's no right and wrong. It's like together trying to find something that works for that team.
Oh, thank you. It's great answer. Thank you. And also now let's move on. Let's see the next question. How to handle resistance to coaching within the team?
I love that one. I think because there's a piece of broader context that needs to be brought in. Coaching has a very different reception depending on the culture you're in. So there's some countries and organizations, so I'm talking about country culture and organizational culture. There's some countries, some organizations where coaching is literally, it's for high performers. You get coaching, it's like, wow, this is such a sign of recognition. It's really, really good. You can be proud, and you can go through the ranks and be like, haha, I have a coach, and everyone looks up to you because you've got a coach. Now, other extreme organizations and countries where coaching is really not great. It's like, you're such a shitty, bad performer, excuse my language, so bad that you're going to get a coach. Because really, we don't know how else to help you. It's hopeless. So people in that culture, they're going to hide. They'll be like, yeah, I got a coach, but I'm not going to talk about it. Not going to say anything. So this is more remedial coaching. So I think the resistance to coaching, depends on the context. Like, are you in a country and organizational context that is where coaching is being celebrated, where coaching is being seen as really an investment in your growth? Or is it more a context where coaching is like not viewed positively at all? It's for low performers, for people where nothing else helped. That's the first thing. Second thing is obviously the personal history of the person. So maybe they had a bad experience with a coach. Because let's remember, the reason when I talked about coach training, the reason I emphasized the importance of an EMCC or ICF accredited provider is that everyone can wake up and call themselves a coach. Everyone. Like, literally, my 9-year-old could wake up tomorrow and say, I'm a coach, and have a website and start coaching people, right? There's no regulation in the industry. And as a result, some people get burned by bad coaches, people who don't know what they're doing. And I feel very passionate about that. I think anyone who calls themselves a coach needs to have professional accredited training and needs to have regular supervision in place. It's a must. You owe it to your clients because the damage we can do is huge. So that's the second thing, the history that person has with coaching. And then the third one is really how it's being. Coaching will not work if the person does not want it. Let's put it this way. So I can have a nice conversation with someone, but we're not going to go anywhere if they don't want it. And so very often with clients, when it's a three-way contracting, so it means when it's not someone who comes directly to me, but they're being assigned by the company, I check with them and I tell them upfront, I'm like, look, it's not going to work if you don't want to work with me. And if I sense that the person really does not want to work with me, you can't. Like, that's it. So you can try to build trust as a coach. So it goes back to the competence of building trust and safety. You can explain what coaching is. You can explain how it works. You can see if there's a connection with that person. But if after all of this you haven't managed, I would not do the assignment because it's a waste of money for the company. It's a waste of time for me and for the coachee. Sorry, there's no magic pill on this one.
Thank you. You can see that it's so valuable and powerful to follow such as ENBC competence framework. It's so important. Thank you. And then now let's see the next question. The question is, during challenging times, how do leaders maintain employee engagement and motivation?
You know, the most enriching experience I've made in that respect, and I talked about this with a client of mine just last week, is when you are in a company, you have a lot of levers, right, to motivate people. There's the salary, there's the progression. You can tell them, oh, you do a good job, you're going to be promoted next year, and then they work a lot. So you have a lot of levers. What I found fascinating is when you work with volunteers in a not-for-profit. They're not getting paid. There are no titles as such. It's more teamwork. And to look at, okay, what motivates them then? And very often, I go back to the coaching skills. If you can give people feedback about their skills and appreciation as to what they do well, what they contributed, and you can additionally also evoke awareness about things that they did not know about themselves. So either by giving feedback on, oh, you do this really, really well, and they might not have realized, then this is a real gift that you can give them. So I find that those levers, if you apply them in addition to, you know, the salary and the job promotion and all the additional levers that you have in the workplace, that really can help with employee engagement and motivation. It's around finding out who is the person in front of you? What do they want? Back to the curiosity, right? What do they want? And how can you support them in that? And you might not be able to support them in everything. Sometimes employees want a lot of things, and as a leader, you can't give it to them. But then you can have very frank conversations around, look, I can't give you this, but I can give you this, this, and this. I can give you feedback. I can give you stretch assignments. I can help you to shape your awareness. I can give you, I don't know, coaching skills. If you watch me, you'll learn them, whatever it may be, right? So I find all those things help. And if you are unsure as to what really motivates people, go volunteer with volunteers and you'll see what makes people tick. Usually a big part of it is as well the sense of doing something useful. So connecting to some sort of vision, connecting to some sort of impact that you're able to have through your work.
Maybe if these are some intangible results, but very productive for the employee. And, and maybe it does much good to their growth, personal growth, and for the future improvement.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Now let's see the next question, and we will still have several questions. Let me see. Yeah, here. How can organizations measure the ROI of coaching?
This is a funny one because there's a lot of research out there in terms of ROI. What I like to measure instead is a bit what I did on my last slide, right? Is what's the cost of not having those competences? Because the problem is, I used to be chief of staff. As a chief of staff, your role is to make sure you don't have problems. How do you measure all the problems you did not have? Very difficult because they did not happen. So there's no way you can measure them. And it's a little bit the same with coaching. In effect, the ROI of coaching is obviously the higher productivity you have, the fewer conflicts that you have, the better improved innovation that you have, the improved teamwork that you have, the improved cross-cultural competence that you have. How do you measure what not having it would have cost you? It's difficult because obviously you're never gonna run an A/B experiment with one team not. You could have one team not having it and one team having it, and then you would have a slight comparison, although it's not the same manager, it's not the same team members, it's not the same business unit, not the same problems. So scientifically, my husband is a scientist, my parents are scientists. It's impossible to do a real scientific experiment on the ROI, but you can have measures like the ones I had in my slides of the cost of not having it. And then you look, I mean, these costs were in the billions and millions. You look at the cost of training, it's a drop in the ocean. It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer financially. Everyone should be trained. All the leaders should be trained in coaching skills.
Thank you. Actually, it seems to be a new perspective for us to know about the ROI. And maybe in some coaching situations, people will the leaders will see like the change of behaviors of the employees as an indicator that like this.
Yes, you can. So usually what organizations do is they have some ratings around some capabilities at the beginning of the coaching on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you rate yourself, and at the end of the coaching. And then the employee rates themselves on it. And very often you have the manager and sometimes some peers who are asked to contribute to that rating as well. So you have a before and an after picture that's numeric because there's a scale of 1 to 10.
Thank you. And given the time, let's see maybe the last question. It's about the leaders themselves. How can leaders develop resilience when facing high pressure?
That's a beautiful one. And it's a very complex one. I'd say number one is the perspective. So that's also a coaching competence, right? Around enabling insight. As really the perspective of, okay, where am I right now? I'm in my problem really hard, going above it. One of my clients always asks me to go on the helicopter with me. So he's a COO in the company, lots of problems. And when we talk, we go in the helicopter and we see things from above. We see things slightly more strategically. Another client of mine shared how her husband is always asking her, is someone dying? And she really doesn't like this question, but it's a good one because then she realizes, no, actually, she's not a doctor. So actually no one is dying if she doesn't do this report. So it's okay. Again, a sense of perspective is usually very helpful. And the other things, obviously, we're community animals. So having a really strong team, having people who support you, who have your back is another contributor to resilience. And I'd say if I have to name a third one, there are a list of wellness and well-being indicators, but self-care is really important. Because if you don't make it, the product and your report will not get written because you're sick in bed. So in terms of self-care, there are various elements, but I'd say sleep, really important. Don't cut back on it. all too often leaders do all-nighters trying to finish things, but the performance is not that good and not worth it. There's much more to that. This would be another 1-hour conversation. But I hope those 3 pointers help in terms of perspective, support from others, and self-care.
Thank you. Yeah, especially in today's environment, the economic environment, actually, it's hard for many leaders to face the challenge, especially today after the COVID, and today in the 2024, it's hard for many leaders, and we can see that. And
Yeah.
just like you shared, the awareness is always the first and foremost. I think it's always keep that lead us to be aware of what we are facing, where we are, and what we should do. Yeah, and also when we turn negative, because we are human, we can have bad emotions. But if we have the awareness, remind us of that what we are, and we can change our perspective. That is very important. Thank you very much. Thank you, Liz. Thank you for your wonderful presentation today, and thank you for your support for EMCC China. It's a great pleasure to have you here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for your questions.
And thank you. And then it's an hour and gives them the time. Yeah, I think that's all for today's webinar. And after the webinar, perhaps tomorrow, I will email you about the feedback of the webinar and also about the number of views, how many people watched online.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good rest of the day.
You too. Bye.
Bye. 我们非常感谢丽老师刚才给我们带来的精彩的分享。我们相信，大家也收获了很多新的视角，特别是在现在这么就是压力大的这个现在的环境下，那我们领导者也面临了很多的问题，可能自身，可能公司，可能团队各种各样的问题。相信大家对今天的讲座呢，从中已经有了很大的收获。好，我们在这里也预告一下我们下期的这个直播。下期直播呢是由来自德国的 Wood Franzen Schwack， 我们的他是 EMCC 大师级教练，然后也是福布斯教练委员会的成员。那 Wood 女士将给我们带来的话题是数字化时代导师教练的机遇和挑战。那本次讲座呢是在下周5月16号的星期四的晚上同一时间7点到8点。那如果大家感兴趣的话，可以点击左上角关注我们，然后预约本次讲座的直播。